What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about some myths that Americans are told about the UK. So I find this to be very interesting because this affects me directly, in the sense that it sounds like I have been lied to about the UK and I didn't even know it. So today, I really want to check out this video by Jay Vale and learn about some of these misconceptions, myths, and straight up lies that most Americans believe about the UK. So let's take a look.
I am an American and I have lived in the United Kingdom for over 5 years. I'm a permanent
Oh,
resident here in the United Kingdom and I'm about to become a British citizen as well.
whoa. Wow, that's at least in my experience, I don't know anybody who's done all that. This is actually a fellow American who's living in the UK, and not just that, living in the UK for 5 years. That's impressive. But he's also like, about to fully become a British citizen and all that, which yeah, you don't honestly see that too much, at least from, Americans that I know. I don't know anybody who's done anything remotely close to that. So that's cool because that kind of makes this guy like a really good authority on this exact topic, He is an American living in the UK for a long time, so he would know the reality of life in the UK and be able to compare that to what we are taught about the UK here in the US. So, okay, this is perfect. So he would know.
And before I came to the United Kingdom, there was a lot of myths and rumors that I heard, and even now living in the United Kingdom, there's many rumors and myths that I hear as well from Americans back home,
Hmm.
most of which aren't true or the truth that is in them is very little. And
Oh
I
wow.
wanted to cover some of those. And to those who
Okay.
watch my short videos,
Okay.
I've gone over most of these in separate videos. So, number one, the United Kingdom has no freedom of speech.
Oh. Hmm. That's an interesting one. But that's a good one. I would actually So, are we taught here in the United States that there is no freedom of speech in the UK? I wouldn't go that far, actually, but I think I kind of know what he's getting at. The reality of living in the United States is that we are definitely taught that we are special, that our freedom of speech, that our rights and our freedoms here in the US are special, and that we are a very unique country, and nobody is as free as us. So in that sense, we definitely are taught kind of something like this, but maybe not directly pointed at the UK. It's really like a lot of Americans don't think any other country in the world has freedom of speech. At least not like we have here in the US, where. So, I see what he's saying.
Technically, this one is not incorrect because the United Kingdom doesn't have what's called freedom of speech, it has what's called freedom of expression, which is
Hmm.
pretty much the same thing. I'll put up the definition, but just go look it up.
Freedom of. So, it's. Are we just like splitting hairs here? Like, it's like literally just a different way of saying it? Or. The UK has freedom of speech, primarily protected as freedom of expression under Article 10 of the Human Rights Act. I don't know if it's part of your like British Constitution or whatever, but it looks like you have something. A speech, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all sounds the same to me. However, it is a qualified right, not an absolute one, meaning it can be restricted by law to prevent disorder, protect national security, or stop hate speech. So there is a slight difference. And this is really just it's really just how you personally view how far you think the freedom to say something should go. Here in the United States, I mean, you could argue that we take it too far, that people can say things that are hurtful and harmful and cause misinformation and suffering and danger even through, lies or hate. And but there's a lot of Americans who think that that is not necessarily good, but necessary, that freedom of speech be taken that far. So it's really just like how you view it philosophically, like the best way. So yeah, I mean, clearly the UK, just based on this alone, you have your own standards for like freedom of speech or expression. So you certainly have it.
But the main difference between what Americans think of freedom of speech and the freedom of expression that people have in the UK is that there is a responsibility to the individual with freedom of expression, and that if you are inciting violence, spreading hate speech, things like that, there's going to be repercussions for that.
Yeah, this is a difficult one because here in the United States, from a very, very young age, as children, they drill it into our head like you are free. Freedom of speech. You can say, that is a God-given right, and you exercise it and say whatever you want, and and you're taught that that's a very good thing. So that's what most of us Americans genuinely believe, and it's what we're taught. But I do think there's something here like valuable that we need to, probably pay attention to. The British interpretation of freedom of expression, where it's like any weapon, really. It's weird to use that analogy, but you you have to be careful, and there's a certain privilege that comes with owning a gun or driving a car or being able to say things that can have real world consequences and it can hurt people. And so the idea here in the US, we don't really monitor that or constrain that, even though it can hurt people. And it's definitely a fine line. I'll say that. Maybe that's the American in me coming out. But I think there's definitely something we need to learn from the UK version of this.
I find that some Americans seem to think that freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want without any consequence. Of course, this is not true. Freedom of speech does not equal freedom from consequences, and you can be arrested
Absolutely.
in the US for saying horrible things the same way you can in the UK.
Absolutely. And that's the way it should be, right? Like, you can run out into the public square and scream that you're going to blow up a building, but like you can go do that, like, but you're gonna get like tackled and arrested and charged with a crime, as you should be. So it's like it's good that we at least have those constraints. Like, you can't do anything.
However, there is a little bit of truth, especially when it comes to the social media side of things. There has been arrests that have happened in the UK where there has been a debate on whether or not it was the right thing to do and whether or not the government overstepped their bounds.
I guess that's the big concern here in the United States, especially if you're censoring people for posting on social media, like their thoughts, even if their thoughts are wrong or ugly or hurtful. It's like, who gets to decide where the line is? Sometimes the line is very clear, and there's really no debating, like, you should not say this or that, or this literally endangers people, or is racist or something like that. But in a lot of circumstances, I think I find myself certainly thinking like, who gets to determine like the line for some of these not so clear things that are just people's thoughts that you might not like, but they need to be said so that we can disavow them and or discourage them or argue against them or support them. But it needs to be said, or we'll never even have that opportunity. I don't mean to go on some kind of like rant about this, but it's hard, I guess, when you think about it. It's hard to say what exactly is the best way.
For myself personally, I have never felt my freedom of speech in any way, shape, or form to have suffered at all here in the UK. It feels
Okay.
exactly like back home in the US.
Okay.
The next
That's good to know. I mean, that says a lot to me. Like, just in his normal existence, he's never felt like suppressed or censored or. So it's probably true that a lot of Americans are too critical about that. Okay.
myth is that London is a dangerous place.
London is a these are interesting. So, that's a myth. I would say the only thing I've heard about London being dangerous is like I've heard about this something going on with knives or blades, like a lot of knife crime or something. Like that was a problem or but as for London being dangerous, I honestly just think most major cities, no matter what country you're in, like frankly, most major cities like just have higher crime because there's more people and more opportunity to do it. And so I've personally as an American, I've never like felt any bias against London in particular.
This is not true. In fact, when you compare the city of London to almost every city in the United States, the city of London is actually safer.
I'm not surprised by that at all, actually.
Another myth. Even though they don't have guns in the UK, knife crime is really bad.
Okay, I'm glad that he brought this up because this is perfect because I guess this is a myth. I've just heard that there's knife crime in the UK and it's bad and there's like receptacles for collecting knives and you made like a statue out of the knives and so I have heard this one actually. So let's see if he can convince me otherwise.
This also isn't true. And I've actually made a couple videos on this, and at least according to the stats that I found on the internet, a person is about 40 to 60% more likely to be stabbed to death in the United States than the United Kingdom.
Oh. Oh. That's literally why you have to have the statistics and the data. Because once you pull something like that out, it's like the argument is over. So that's just literally maybe there's a knife crime in the UK, but as Americans, there's no room for us to judge because it's that much worse here. I expected there to be like a lot more gun crime here, but there's just more crime, huh? And per capita too, not just overall.
And that's not even including the guns, that's just knives. So when Americans back home claim that the knife problem in the UK is really bad, you have to understand it's actually worse in the States.
Wow.
Another myth.
I think a lot of Americans do not know that.
Wages are really low in the United Kingdom compared to the United States.
Oh, okay. Wow, he's really shattering a lot of misconceptions. This one again is kind of like the first one in the sense that a lot of Americans just think that we are the wealthiest. You make so much money if you're in the United States and nothing directly we don't disparage the UK like specifically. Like I think when it comes to like, oh, we make so much more money, I think we just think we're better off than everyone in the world, like in a broad sense. So
Now, this one actually has some truth to it, but people do like to exaggerate it. Well, in my
Oh.
personal experience and what I found, you make between two-thirds to about 75, 80% in the UK what you would in the United States.
So this is just like an average, and you technically, on average, make more in the United States, but it's not. It's nothing like what a lot of Americans think, where like every other place is a third world country or something, and we're just living on our high towers here. And it's like, it's not that drastic.
So, yes, your total income is usually a little bit less. However, for the
Okay.
most part, I found that things balance out.
Okay.
For example, in the US, you have to pay for expensive health insurance, which you don't have to do in the UK because of the NHS, the universal healthcare system that they have. And
Right.
the cost of living in cities in the UK tends to be lower than cities in the US, unless we're talking about London, of course.
Oh. Yeah, that makes a massive difference. What? Yeah. If the because what you make matters, but the cost of living determines if what you make, like how, like what it all means. So it's cheaper to exist in a lot of parts of the UK than in the US. That makes a big difference.
And so, for the most part, I find things kind of even out. I wouldn't say that my quality of life in the UK has changed at all from my quality of life in the US. I can
Okay.
still afford the same lifestyle.
Okay.
But it is true that when I look up the total dollar amount in the US, you tend to make more money. For example, my career definitely makes more money in the United States.
Okay.
However, there are some things that skew this. For example, there
I'll just say it seems to me he's doing a good job clearing up like a lot of myths that Americans believe about the UK or other parts of the world. We really are just really a consequence of us exaggerating our superiority to everyone else. That's like the cause of a lot of these myths, it seems like. And we definitely need an ego check.
are much more rich people in the United States, and so obviously that skews the numbers a bit. Whereas if
Oh,
you
yeah.
take them out of the equation, you find that the average person in the US doesn't make quite as much as you think, but
Oh,
still a decent amount.
sure.
Also, it's worth noting that federal minimum wage, at least off the top of my head, is still around $7.25 an hour, which is substantially lower than the minimum wage that the UK has.
That is one of the most insane realities of the United States. That the federal minimum wage is that low. That is insane. You cannot live on minimum wage in the United States. Like, that is impossible. Yeah, that's, yeah, one of the biggest embarrassments of the US right there.
Now, granted, many US states have higher minimum wages than this, but there are places in the US that follow that federal minimum wage.
Yeah.
Another myth is that you pay a ton of taxes in the UK. Now, this
Um, yeah, I would say this is something that a lot of Americans think. Is this not true? Because you guys like pay all the taxes that pay for your health care, right? Which is cool. I like the sound of that, but I think a lot of Americans assume that that means you're getting taxed a lot.
may be true for those who are really wealthy in the UK. You probably pay more in taxes than people in the US.
Hmm.
However, for me personally, I found that the taxes I paid in the US and the taxes I paid in the UK are really not that much different, maybe a
Oh,
couple percent at most. In fact, there was a period when I first moved to the UK that I found out I actually had paid a higher percentage overall in taxes in the US than I did here in the UK.
what? It's just it's basically the same taxes essentially. That's what he's saying. Except you guys have healthcare coverage. I would kill to have the government cover my health care. I would glad if I knew that's what my taxes were going towards, like my health care, and I didn't have to worry. Oh my god, so many Americans would love that. We would pay a little more in taxes, like I would gladly. So yeah, this makes total sense.
But obviously, as my income has gone up in the UK and I've gone into higher tax brackets, That's changed slightly, but the UK uses a progressive tax system just like the US.
Yeah.
So obviously you only pay into the next bracket what you're making in that bracket, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know
But
what he
most
means.
people in the UK are not paying half their income in taxes. The highest tax bracket is 45%. But no, you're not paying half your income in taxes in the UK. First,
I think there are a decent amount of Americans who would be pretty shocked by that. I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't think you guys had that crazy of taxes, but I did think it would be like bigger because of the healthcare. It sounds like it's really not.
£12,500 you make in the UK, you pay no taxes on. And then after that, it goes in different brackets, starting with 20%.
Wow.
And I believe at the time of speaking, at least, that the highest bracket is 45%.
Okay.
Another thing to remember on this as well is that when you do US tax brackets, you often have to include the state tax as well, which can be anywhere from
True.
nothing if you live in a state like Texas, all the way up to around 12% or so.
Yeah. Right. You guys don't have state taxes because you don't have. I have never thought about this.
So how much you pay in tax in the US entirely depends on where you live. And there's a lot more I could say about that. For example, Texas, even though they have no state income tax, if you own a home, they have really high property taxes. But that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Point is, no matter where you live, they get you somehow. Another myth is that British food is really bad.
This one makes me laugh because I've heard this one. This is actually a prevalent myth. Like, especially on the internet, you see this a lot. I don't know why. Like, I've never really had British food. I've ordered some like candy, which was pretty decent actually. I don't know why British food has such a bad reputation. Here in the US, yeah, this is definitely, maybe the number one myth. Or, I mean, we don't know if it's a myth or not, but I'm assuming it's a myth because it's on this list. And honestly, I've always been a little skeptical of this because it's like, yeah, some of your food is weird to us. Very weird. But, like, that doesn't. There's food from all over the world that's really weird to me. But that doesn't mean it's bad.
I can understand why some people might not like some of the British cuisines. For example, I still cannot get my head around black pudding. It's just not my thing.
Right, there's stuff like black pudding, which is like animal blood or something. Yeah, there's some weird come on. Even British people got to admit some of it's kind of weird. And then there's stuff like the Sunday roast thing, which just looks objectively delicious. Like that just looks great.
But a lot of the dishes that I've had here in the UK are absolutely delicious. For example, a Sunday roast is an
What the heck? Yeah, that's funny. We're on the same American wavelength here. Yeah, like I think any American would say like if you just served them this and didn't tell them it was British, they'd be like, "Oh, this is great."
absolutely
I don't know what this puffy cauliflower thing on top is, but it looks great.
phenomenal meal. If you don't like a Sunday roast, I mean, you might as well hate Thanksgiving as well, because that's probably the closest thing that it's like.
I agree.
But you can also get food from all around the world in the UK as well. For example, curry is very popular in the United Kingdom, obviously as there is a high population from India and the surrounding Asian nations.
Huh.
And I must say, the curries that I have had here in the UK have been phenomenal. And with
Yeah, I mean, I'll just have to take his word for it. Like, obviously, the only real way to quash this myth is for like if like every American could try British food, but I don't know why this is such a prevalent stereotype about the UK. Like, yeah, I'm glad he's talking about this.
stereotypes aside, I've never really felt that the food is bad here. I think sometimes us Americans need to humble ourselves and remember that we are the land of the fast food. We produced places like McDonald's, Burger King,
Yeah,
places that aren't exactly celebrated for their fine cuisine.
that's true. We're like we're very happy with our fast food, yet we're like criticizing this like fresh, delicious looking British food, except for blood pudding.
And I'm sure there's many other myths I could cover, but the point is that not everything you're told is true.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a really good video, and it's cool seeing this from a fellow American's perspective. Like, I wasn't expecting that. So he like, as an American, I trust this guy. He's an American who lives in the UK. He's experienced it. He's done the reconnaissance. He's reporting back, and it's like, it's honestly cool to see him like disproving a lot of these British myths that some of these are more like common in the US and some of these are kind of like not even that particular, like that you guys earn less or stuff like that. Like it's more like a general US superiority complex that we have, I think. But overall, I think that this was very informative. This was good. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave comments with your thoughts on any of these British myths. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to British things that I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.